Hi, it's Courtney. I'm back again with more of my horror movie collection, um, recommendations and suggestions for Halloween viewing. I guess watching on Halloween night or maybe showing at Halloween parties. So today in my collection, I'm going to talk about movies that I enjoy based on the works of my one of my favorite authors, Stephen King. So I have a lot of Stephen King books, and I enjoy the movies, whether they are good or bad. So so yeah, this is my part of my Stephen King collection that I'll be talking about today. I've got two miniseries, and I have a made for TV movie, and of course other films that were actually released in theaters. So first off is The Stand. This was a TV miniseries back in 1994, and so The Stand is one of Stephen King's longest books, about as long as it. So if you have like a paperback copy of it, it's pretty thick. It's about as thick as a doorstop. If you ever had like one of those little like brick doorstops, it's about that thick. Um, so this miniseries and the book written by Stephen King is about a a disease that is created by the military, and they end up calling it Captain Trips, and it ends up wiping almost all of the population out, except for handfuls of people. Um, some of the people are heroes and are on the side of good, where they see visions of an old black woman named Mother Abigail, and they go off to find her. And some of the people that survive kind of more the scrupulous, um, kind of darker personality of people, and they go off and follow a man called Randall Flagg. He has many names. Most of them, most famous one is the Walking Dude, or the Man in Black, which connects him to other works of Stephen King. And so you've got like, good and evil kind of going against each other, and some people turn from being bad to turning good, and some people turn from being good to being bad, and it's got a very very large cast of characters. And I've read that when Stephen King was writing the book, he kind of got complacent with the characters for a while and kind of got writer's block. So in order to get over the writer's block, he ended up writing a scene where a lot of characters, even like really minor characters, and a few major ones that he wrote about, he killed them off to have the story go along. So of course, this miniseries, it has a great cast of actors and characters. Um, it's got Gary Sinise. He plays Stu Redman. He's from Texas, and he lost his wife and child a long time ago, and he kind of becomes like the main leader of the people that go to see Mother Abigail, and he gets taken to like these disease control center in Vermont, and all the people of the town that he goes with, he's the only one that survives. Um, it has Molly Ringwald as Franny Goldsmith, and she's from Maine, and before the story um, follows her after what happens, her and her boyfriend Jess, she ends up getting pregnant, and they kind of separate from each other, and her and another member of their town, um, Harold Lauder. He's a young geeky kid with pit bulls and stuff, and he has a crush on Franny. And here he's played by Corin Nemec, and they're the only two people that survive in their town. And of course, so Fran goes through the entire series pregnant. So and since she doesn't die, but the baby's father does, it kind of implies that the child might be immune or might not be immune to the Captain Trips virus that wipes everybody out. And then there's Larry Underwood. He's a rock star, rock singer. Kind of the way King wrote him is kind of like Bruce Springsteen, and he's played by Adam Stork, and he's kind of not a nice guy in the beginning. He's kind of self-absorbed and self-centered, but he loves his mom, and there's a really kind of sad and touching scene where his mother gets sick. He comes back from California to New York to actually kind of get away from drug dealers that he owes money to. But he comes home to his mom, and his mom gets sick, and he ends up meeting another woman, Nadine Cross, played by Laura San Giacomo, and they kind of have like an attraction to each other, but she doesn't act on her attraction to Larry because apparently she's been promised to marry Randall Flagg for a long time, and but her and Larry have like sparks and a little bit of conflict to it, and so they go off. I'm reading through most of the cast that they have back on here. So Jamie Sheridan plays Randall Flagg. He's supposed to be this really evil incarnate type entity, but he comes off very like affable and charming. So but that's what makes him even more scary and creepy. So some of the effects in this are kind of dated because it's early 90s, but when they try to make him look a little bit more like a monster, it can come off kind of goofy, but it works a little bit. Let's see. Ruby Dee plays Mother Abigail, and she plays her really well, and she's got a sense of humor, but she's still very serious. And her husband Ossie Davis is in this too. He plays Judge Ferris, another one of Mother Abigail's followers. And there's Ray Walston. He plays an older man named Glenn, who used to be a teacher, and he's very wise, and he has a dog with him, and the dog is named Kojak. And apparently in the book, though, Kojak is like the only dog that survives the Captain Trip virus. Yeah, it kills animals off too, except for cats and wolves, and apparently Kojak's the only dog. Well, for most of the book he is anyway, but still. But he, Ray Walston, he's got that old wise man, philosophical kind of personality, and I guess he kind of becomes like maybe a father figure for the younger men. as they travel along. Let's see who else can I mention off here. Not too much, not to give too much away. Matt Frewer. Most people know him most famously as Max Headroom. He plays Trash Can Man. He's a pyromaniac who likes to set things on fire, and is kind of like an outsider, outcast in society. So he goes off to find Randall Flagg, and he's very like religiously kind of enamored with him. And he plays the character kind of sympathetic and crazy, so you kind of feel a little bit bad for him. But sometimes he's intentionally hammy and kind of hilarious, but I don't think it was intentional. Let's see. The late Miguel Herrera plays Lloyd Henreid. He's a robber, and he and his partner are out robbing a general store, and they kill a bunch of people, and his partner Poke gets shot and dies, and Lloyd gets taken to prison, and everybody in the prison dies from Captain Trips, and he's the only one left alive, and he gets set free by Randall Flagg to kind of be like his man at arms, his right hand man. And I love Miguel Ferrer. He's just cool and charming, but he's kind of got that edge to him where he could probably go crazy at any minute, and he's a robber. He's killed people, so he's kind of ruthless, but still charming and also kind of sympathetic. And the last great actor, probably my favorite character in The Stand, is Nick Andros, played by Rob Lowe, and he is a deaf mute, so he can't talk and he can't hear. He's in this small town, and he gets beaten up by the bullies in the town and taken to the jail by the sheriff of the town, who kind of makes him his deputy, and he has to look after the men that beat him up. And then the virus hits, and everybody dies except for Nick, and he's left alone trying to fend for himself. And he ends up going to Oklahoma, where he meets a young man named Tom Cullen. He's not young after he gets closer to knowing him. He's an older man, but he has like the mind of a child, so he's kind of slow. And he's played by Bill Fagerbakke, who does the voice of Patrick Star on SpongeBob. Big, tall, blonde man. And I like Tom Cullen too. He's since he's slow and he has the mind of a child, he's very sweet and endearing, and so Nick's like a deaf mute, so they call him deaf and dumb. So he and Tom have this kind of warm relationship that I like a lot. And I think Rob Lowe does a great job playing Nick Andros, because he doesn't talk, and he just has to act off everybody with his facial expressions. And his character writes down notes and stuff for people to read. So for being someone that can't talk or can't hear, he's actually pretty intelligent. So but there's so many characters and so many people, and there's so many cameos in here. It's just really enjoyable to watch. Most of the time I see The Stand in a package with The Langoliers and The Golden Years, two other Stephen King miniseries, but I was lucky to find this one from Artisan Home Entertainment just on its own. So I don't have my disc in here, of course, but it's a 3-disc set with special features on it. But The Stand is really enjoyable. I like it. So next up is Again, I have it in a collector's edition sleeve, so I'll take it out of the sleeve a little bit, but it is from 1990, and it is Misery with James Caan and Kathy Bates. Kathy Bates, who won an Academy Award for this, Best Actress. So I'm gonna put it back in the sleeve so it'll take some of the glare off of it, but it's just easier to show because most of my sleeve ones have Walmart or Best Buy or Myers stickers on them. But Paul Sheldon, played by James Caan, is a novelist. He's most famous for writing a bunch of books about character Misery Chastain. So they're like period piece, historical romance kind of novels. And he's been writing them for a long time. And he mostly kind of did it as, to take care of his family. In the book, it says most of the royalties and stuff he got from the Misery books was able to send his daughter to college. So he's been writing these books for a long time. And he starts to get tired of writing about the same characters and wants to branch out a little bit. So after finishing work on his newest novel that he wants to get published, he goes off and gets in an auto accident, and he's pinned in the car, and it's out in the snow and cold, and he wakes up in the house of a woman named Annie Wilkes, played by Kathy Bates, who's his #1 fan. She has read all the books based on Misery Chastain. She has a pet pig that she's even named Misery, and she's just one of those really kind of, affable, people. She's very attentive to him, and she gushes about how much she loves his writing, and she's a nurse, so she is planning to take care of him because the roads are blocked in by the snow, and you can see slight hints that she's not kind of all there a little bit, but it really comes to head when she goes and gets Paul's latest book that's been released to the public, and finds out that Paul has killed off the Misery character by having her die in childbirth. And this sets Annie off, and she becomes really crazy. And she starts, withholding medication from him, and, denying him food, and she just goes all out crazy. And she tells him that he is going to write a new book and kind of retcon what he's done and bring Misery back from the dead. And she makes him burn the manuscript that he was working on before his accident, and wants him to do nothing but write this book, bringing Misery back. And so, most of the movie is only in, Paul's bedroom and in other rooms of Annie's house, and it's just James Caan and Kathy Bates through most of the movie. We do get some scenes where it goes off to the sheriff of the town, played by Richard Farnsworth, trying to locate Paul Sheldon because they find his car, but they don't find him. So they're trying to think, maybe he kind of crawled away from the crash. So it does go to scenes of that, and but mostly it's Kathy Bates and James Caan, their characters in this house. So it has kind of like this claustrophobic kind of feel a little bit, where you're like wanting Paul to find a way to get out. And of course it has the famous hodling scene. So again, people have heard about it, but a lot of people probably haven't seen it. It's actually a little bit more tame to what happens in the book. But Paul is kind of able to get out of his room and try to find a way out, and he learns a little bit more about Annie's past and realizes that she's full blown crackers. So, So it does have that claustrophobic kind of feel, and it's directed by Rob Reiner, and most people know him for, like, Spinal Tap and everything, but he's directed like The Princess Bride and Stand By Me, so he's really good at telling the story. But they even eventually like turned this into like kind of an off-Broadway play, which I can see that working because, like I said, it's mostly two characters, one room. So, but I like Misery a lot. It's a really good film, and it's not a slasher. It doesn't it doesn't use a lot of gore. It does have a kind of disturbing imagery, but it doesn't use blood and gore. And like The Stand that I just talked about, they don't. I mean, they have a lot of effects in that one, but it doesn't rely on gore or nudity or a lot of visceral imagery to creep you out. Like I said, it's claustrophobic, and you're like, oh my god, what's gonna happen next? Is he gonna get away? What's gonna happen? You're like holding your breath. So, but Misery is a really good film. It is rated R in the language, but it's not that harsh of a Stephen King movie for people to enjoy. So, next up, I actually have 3 movies in one package. It's from a series called When Animals Strike Back, because this says it's volume 2, so I have no idea what volume 1 is. But I got this one because it's got 3 Stephen King movies all in one. So, took it out of the little sleeve, but it's got Graveyard Shift, Silver Bullet, and Pet Sematary all in one package. So, put it back in the sleeve a little bit. So I have no idea what volume 1 had in it, but I got this because I love Stephen King. So of course it's got a sales sticker on it. I think I found this at like FYE in the mall. So I'm actually going to go a little different in order than how I said these. 1989's Pet Sematary, based on probably one of Stephen King's scariest books. He's even admitted that it scares him, and he wrote it. He also, kind of wrote it in a time in his life where, he was, drinking alcohol a lot and taking, cocaine and other drugs, but he wrote it based on, like, incidences in his real life that kind of influenced some parts of the book. And I tried reading Pet Sematary in high school, and I never got through it because I don't remember if parts of it were too frightening for me or if I was just not interested enough in reading it. But I eventually bought a copy of it for myself to read, and I still haven't been able to get through it. And I don't know, maybe it's that subliminal thing in the back of my head. Like, if this thing scares Stephen King, it's probably going to scare the crap out of you. But it's about the Creed family. Lewis, his wife Rachel, their daughter Ellie, and their son Gage. And they have a cat named Church, short for Winston Churchill. And they moved to this small Maine town called Ludlow. And they meet their neighbor across the street, Judd Crandall. In the movie, he's played by Fred Gwynne, Herman Munster. And in the book, Judd has a wife named Norma. In the movie, he doesn't. So, but they live across the street from Judd, and there's this highway road next to their house where a lot of 18-wheeler trucks go by. And Judd says it's a really dangerous road that's killed a lot of, pets over the years. So he ends up taking the Creed family to this pet cemetery in the woods. to show all the pets that have died, some from the road and some, like birds and fish. And there's a place beyond the pet cemetery by a deadfall of trees, and Judd tells them like the ground beyond it is kind of an Indian burial ground. Lewis ends up getting visions from the ghost of a dead college student named Victor Pascal that tells him not to go beyond the deadfall of the trees. The ground beyond is sour and it's evil. That changes when Church gets, I'm not sure in the movie, definitely, if he gets hit and then just goes to die in Judd's yard, but the cat's dead, so Judd takes Lewis to the Micmac Indian burial ground to bury Church, and the cat comes back. But it's not the same cat. It's an evil cat, and it's a more brutal, primal kind of cat than the one that was alive before. Because, most of the time when you get cats neutered, male cats, they don't wander and they're a lot more lazier. This isn't the same for Church. He goes off and, kills birds and not just eat them just for like sport of it. They go through this film, and it talks about life and death, and if you lost somebody, what would you do to bring them back? And of course it eventually gets a little closer to home than just losing a family pet for the Creed family. And of course Lewis is going to do anything he can to keep his family, and his wife Rachel's kind of has an aversion to talking about death and stuff because she had a sister when she was younger named Zelda who had like spinal meningitis, and it turned her into looking like a monster, and I think it kind of affected her brain a little bit where it made her kind of almost sinister in a way, and so she eventually she dies, and Rachel's the only one at home when that happens. So yeah, there are a lot of themes in Pet Sematary, and I know they're getting ready to re-release it in a remake, but I love the 1989 version. It's just it's about a family. It's about life and death and the kind of scruples that you have. I mean, how would you handle if something happened to someone that you love? So I would recommend seeing Pet Sematary. I know it does it's got scenes in it that might be a little disturbing and unnerving. So I've gotten to a point where I avert my eyes sometimes when that happens. But it's still a good movie. Next up is Silver Bullet. It's based on a shorter story written by Stephen King called Cycle of the Werewolf, where it was kind of based around a calendar, Cycle of the Werewolf, and it went through like different months and different holidays that fall in those months involving a werewolf. And it's from 1985, and it has a young Corey Haim as Marty Coslaw. He's a young boy in a wheelchair, and he lives in the town of Harker's Mill with his family and his sister Jane, played by Megan Follows, from the original TV version of Anne of Green Gables. And she doesn't like having to take care of Marty all the time because he kind of interferes with her, being a teenager and being one of those social kind of girls. And they had their Uncle Red, played by Gary Busey, who's been married tons of times and divorced tons of times, and he's an alcoholic, but Marty looks up to him, and so it has a lot of family dynamic about his mom being overprotective of him because he's in a wheelchair, and Uncle Red saying that just because Marty's handicapped doesn't mean it's gonna keep him from living his life. So it focuses on that a little bit more, but of course it's a werewolf movie. So apparently people have been getting murdered in Tarker's Mill, and eventually after months it affects the town a little bit when all these people get killed, because first it starts out with like a town drunk, so nobody says anything, and then around February a woman who was pregnant gets murdered, and then it goes through a couple of other murders until Marty's friend Brady is killed, and then that really shakes up the town. They kind of have like this mob mentality to go off and find this, who I guess they think it's a person who's doing all these horrible things, and it ends up kind of like tearing the town apart. But around July, when the town fireworks get canceled, Marty goes out later that night lighting fireworks, and he runs into the werewolf that has been killing people, and he takes out its eye with a bottle rocket, and he has Jane go through the town collecting bottles to see if she can find out who only has one eye, and they end up finding that the town Reverend Lowe has only one eye. So so it's not one of those things where you don't find out who the monster is until the very end. You find out kind of in the middle, and it goes from that. The werewolf effects, as long as you keep them in the dark, they're okay. But when you actually get to like see the werewolf up close, sometimes it's not really that scary. So it's not as scary as like the werewolves like in American Werewolf in London or The Howling. So so it's got a chilling kind of atmosphere. There's a couple of like dark comedic moments and a couple of comedic moments, but it's still a good movie to watch. It's one of my favorite Stephen King movies. Eventually I'm going to find Cycle of the Werewolf and add it to my book collection. There is a book printing of it. So the last one is Graveyard Shift. It's from 1990. And I'm impressed that you can take a really short story, because this was a short story in Stephen King's Night Shift collection, where it's not very long, but it's about a cotton mill, a textile mill, and it loses one of its employees one night, and a new employee, John Hall, takes over the job, and there are definitely rats overrunning this mill, because there's an exterminator character played by Brad Dourif, so he kind of steals the show whenever he's in it. But there are rats, of course, in this textile mill and overrunning it, but there's something else besides the rats that's in the mill, and it mostly culminates when the foreman of the mill rallies all these employees to clean out the basement during the 4th of July, and they go down in the basement and they find themselves in the rats world now, with this creature that's kind of almost like like a rat king, kind of a big boss rat. But when you finally get to see it, it's kind of off-putting, might be a little cheesy and a little silly, but I'm just impressed that you can take a short story and turn it into a movie based on just a premise of employees are down in the basement of a mill and something's after them. So, because you can take other Stephen King short stories and flesh them out into a movie, and it kind of works, but it's not the best Stephen King adaptation, but still, how you can take a short story based on that premise and turn it into a movie kind of works. So it's a little slow paced, and like I said, Brad Dourif steals the show when he's on screen, but it's an okay film. But so you can get these movies separately. I just happen to find 3 of them for the price of one. I mean, 3 movies for $19.99. That's not bad. So, of course, this is another video that's going to run long because I'm talking about Stephen King, and it's very easy to talk about Stephen King and let the time run away. Next up, I said I had a TV movie. It's part of this collection that I got, and it's the Firestarter 2 movie collection. And you're thinking, 2 Firestarter movies? I thought there was only 1. Okay, so, of course, in 1984, there was an adaptation of Firestarter by Stephen King with Drew Barrymore in it. Little tiny Drew Barrymore. And she plays Charlie McGee. Her and her father, Andy, are running away from an organization called The Shop. And it's because Charlie can start fires with her mind, and she's also kind of like psychic and, precognitive, and they're after her and her dad because her father and mother were part of an experiment where they were injected with something called Lot 6, and it kind of, woke up certain, like, psychic kind of abilities, because Andy's power is that he can push people into, thinking or doing whatever he wants them to do, and he's also kind of telekinetic, because they have a scene where he kind of uses that pushing power of his to, like, get money out of the payphones, which is kind of interesting. But so they're on the run from the shop, and its head, played by Martin Sheen, and they send an agent after Andy and Charlie, John Rainbird, played by George C. Scott, and to bring Charlie to the shop so they can see what she can do, probably to kind of use her as a future weapon, because she can just start fires with her mind, and so it's basically a little girl and her father running away from these people that want to use their abilities for not very good things, and John Rainbird, George C. Scott's character, kind of takes this weird kind of interest in Charlie, and it's a really good movie, and there's like a lot of emotion, and it tells some of the backstory in flashbacks. So, but it has David Keith as Andy McGee, and he plays the role really well. I can see him as a loving father protecting his daughter. And of course, Drew Barrymore she's terrific in everything she does, and it's so hard to believe that when she was so young, doing stuff like Firestarter and E.T., she was just, a really good, actress at such a young age. That's why I still love Drew Barrymore and almost everything that she does. I like George C. Scott in this movie. He has that creepy vibe down really well, and it's kind of a slow-paced movie a little bit, but the score by Tangerine Dream is really good, and cinematography and everything is good about it. It is a little slow-paced, but it stays kind of faithful to the book, which is always good. So the second movie in this is a TV movie made by Sci-Fi called Firestarter 2 Rekindled. And what it does, it follows up a grown-up Charlie McGee, played by Marguerite Moreau, and her trying to stay hidden from the shop, which I guess apparently rebuilt itself after the first movie. Don't want to give away spoilers if you've never seen Firestarter, but so apparently it is going after some people that the shop missed a long time ago through their Lot 6 experiment, which Charlie's parents, Andy and Vicky, were a part of. And the one thing about this that I don't think people will like is if you've read the book. So the only spoiler I'm going to give away is John Rainbird does not live in Firestarter, the book, and he does not live in the movie. So the second one kind of makes it like he didn't die, and he comes back, and this time, since George C. Scott is no longer alive, he's played by Malcolm McDowell. So I won't say Malcolm McDowell is bad, it's just they kind of like retcon a little bit what is supposed to happen. So it's a pretty enjoyable movie for a movie made by Sci-Fi, but this is like early 2000s, maybe late 90s Sci-Fi, so it's not that bad. And it also has Dennis Hopper in Firestarter 2. And so you got a movie with Dennis Hopper and Malcolm McDowell. It's not that bad, but you can expect a little bit of ham thrown your way. But that's okay. Sometimes hamminess works for Stephen King adaptations. But so I don't think they make this 2-movie collection anymore. So it's kind of a find. So I appreciate it a lot. And I know I'm running long. It's probably like my second longest video, but when I get talking about Stephen King, I like talking about Stephen King. So, of course, everybody knows that Stephen King did not like Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining that he did in 1980. Because, mostly I think because of the way they changed the, Jack Torrance character. Because he's supposed to be written as a man haunted by the demons of his past, of his, his alcoholic father and being an alcoholic himself, and and then his alcoholism ends up hurting his family, and he tries to be a better husband and a better father, and so I think when you have Jack Nicholson play a guy that's supposed to start out normal and then become crazy, but he's Jack Nicholson in the beginning, it kind of doesn't work. And then, of course, they changed he changed other aspects, Stanley Kubrick did, of the novel that kind of took away from what King was writing. So eventually, in the late 90s, Stephen King decided he was going to write the screenplay and have a little bit more of a hand in it. And so we got the Shining TV miniseries with the screenplay written by King. And it's directed by Mick Garris, who did The Stand, and it's got Steven Weber as Jack Torrance. Rebecca De Mornay plays Wendy, played by Shelley Duvall in the 1980 version, and it has Cortland Mead as Danny Torrance. I kind of think you would remember him most as from the Little Rascals. So he's just adorably cute in this movie. And it has a pretty solid cast. And of course it basically follows the Torrance family taking care of the Overlook Hotel during the winter off season. And it's just, the three of them in this big giant hotel, and Jack is supposedly writing a new play, and he ends up getting sidetracked by finding stuff in the basement about the history of the hotel, and soon decides that he's going to end up writing about that instead of his play. So it follows more elements that are in the book than what were in the 1980 version. And I like it because, Steven Weber is a very normal guy. You know him from, Wings, and being kind of this carefree kind of person. And then he starts becoming different. He starts acting the way he did when he was drinking, but there's no alcohol in the hotel. And, it starts tearing, the family dynamic apart. And, because the Kubrick version, of course, was released in theaters, you could put more nudity and blood and gore in it. This one is made for TV, so it can't really rely on that as much, so you get more atmosphere and more kind of a, palpable horror than instead of just, like blood and weird imagery thrown at you. It examines the family dynamic more than, just the ghost and the evil spirits in the hotel. The hotel does play a part in the story, but it focuses more on the family and not just the scares and the thrills of the 1980 version. And a lot of people don't like this and say that it's bad. It is kind of cheesy, but I like that it does focus on the family a little bit more. And of course, since it's a mini series, you can flesh it out a little bit longer. And so, of course, this says that it's not rated O. So, but of course, it was shown on TV, so it's not, really overtly gory. There are probably some creepy scenes that might be a little intense. But again, most people say that it's very cheesy. But I do like this version more than I like Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining. So again, it's not a bad film, but if you want a movie that's more, scares and, a little more psychological, then Stanley Kubrick's version is better. But if you just want, a book, a book interpretation on screen that is, more closely, following that, then I would recommend watching the miniseries version of The Shining. So that's my some of my Stephen King movies that I think would be great for you to watch on Halloween. So since this video is running long, I will be back next time with more horror movies for your holiday Halloween viewing pleasure. So until next time, have a nice day.